Washington, D.C. is not in any of the 50 states. Full stop. Washington, D.C. does not reside in the borders of any of the 50 states of the Union. Full stop. The United States of America Constitutional Republic is a collection of 50 states. D.C. is not a part of the 50 states that make up the Union. D.C. is not included in the 50 states that make up the Union, that make up the 1776 Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. D.C. is not within that. Washington, D.C. is not in the United States of America. Okay, so we're going to talk about the de jure Republic, United States of America versus the de facto United States Corporation and the implications that it has, and why it's very important for you to understand the difference between the two and what you can do knowing this information. So we're going to look directly at case law. This is United States Supreme Court case law. All of the cases have been cited. Let's get to it. We have in our political system a government of the United States and a government of each of the several states. Each one of these governments is distinct from the others, and each has citizens of its own. This is case law. Let's see what Google has to say about this. So this quote describes the structure of United States political system as having both a federal government and state governments, each distinct citizens and responsibilities. Distinct governments. The quote emphasizes that the U.S. has two distinct levels of government, the federal government and the governments of the individual states. Citizenship. Each level of government has its own citizens and owe it allegiance and whose rights it protects. So a person can be a citizen of both the United States and a particular state, but their rights and responsibilities may differ depending on the level of government. A person can be a citizen of both the United States and a particular state, but their rights and responsibilities may differ depending on the level of government, and we're going to talk about that as we move along. Now let's go back to the second case law we have here, and this is from McDonald versus the state, 1883. He was not a citizen of the United States. He was a citizen and voter of the state. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. So, someone can be a citizen of a particular state of Michigan, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Virginia. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. This is clearly indicating that a state citizen is not the same thing as a United States citizen, as a citizen of the United States. So we have to keep that in mind as we go along. And what does Google have to say about this one? They're distinguishing a citizen of the state from a citizen of the United States. This is very, very important. So, before the 14th Amendment, the concept of citizenship was complex and sometimes contested. The Constitution recognized both state and national citizenship, but didn't define a comprehensive rule for acquiring either. States commonly conferred citizenship on their white residents, but the status of black Americans and the rights associated with state and national citizenship were subjects of debate. The Dred Scott decision. The Supreme Court's 1857 decision in Dred Scott versus Stanford further implicated the issue, holding that African Americans, even if born in the United States, could not be citizens. Now, they weren't specific about whether they were talking about state citizens or United States citizens, but that, according to my understanding, means that African Americans, even if born in the United States, could not be state citizens For example, citizen of Virginia, citizen of Michigan, citizen of Florida, but they could be, well, it says the rest is up for consideration. So, the 14th Amendment and its impact. Now, we have to understand that before 1871, there was no such thing as a U.S. citizen. You were just a citizen of your state. The United States of America Constitutional Republic was founded in 1776 as a constitutional republic. As a constitutional republic. And the citizens of that constitutional republic are referred to as Americans. So the Constitution of 1776, United States of America, Constitutional Republic, you are American as a citizen of that. And those same citizens had state citizenship. Each of these Americans simply had a state citizenship. There was no such thing as a U.S. citizen in 1776 when the U.S. Constitutional Republic was founded. Very important to remember. You were just a citizen of Virginia, citizen of Georgia, and that meant you are an American. That meant you are a member of the Constitutional Republic. That means you are a part of we the people, as the collection of colonies formed the one United States of America Constitutional Republic, which is distinct from U.S. citizen, which we'll touch on as we move along. In fact, I'll just mention the difference between the two. So again, 1776, Constitutional Republic, United States of America, underneath your feet, land. And then you have 1871, which is this de facto thing we're talking about. We have the incorporation of a corporation called United States in 1871 that has nothing to do with the United States of America Constitutional Republic of 1776. This Constitutional Republic of 1776, United States of America, still stands today. That original Constitution and the Bill of Rights still stand today. Those documents were put in place so that the men and women of the land, the men and women of the Constitutional Republic, would have their rights, their God-given rights, protected by those documents. Those documents were put in place to make sure that no one anywhere in the universe infringes upon the rights of the people of the land. That the people of the land have God-given rights and no one has a right to infringe upon those rights. That Constitution of 1776 still stands. The Bill of Rights still stand. And those documents protect Americans. Those documents were put in place to protect Americans, the people of the Republic. Moving on. That there is a citizenship of the United States and citizenship of a state. Again, we just spoke about that, but we'll see what Google has to say about that. This phrase reflects the long-held understanding within the U.S. legal system of the distinction between citizenship of the United States and citizenship of a particular state. This phrase reflects the understanding of the distinction between citizenship of the United States and citizenship of a particular state. Citizenship of the United States equates to citizenship of the federal corporation that was incorporated in 1871. Citizenship of a particular state, Michigan, Florida, Arizona, New Mexico. Citizenship of a particular state reflects an American that belongs to the 1776 Constitutional Republic, United States of America. Whereas again, citizenship of the United States reflects to being a citizen of the corporation that was incorporated in 1871, which is distinct from the 1776 Constitutional Republic. Moving on. A citizen of the United States is a citizen of the federal government. The federal government is not the Constitutional Republic. Let's see what Google has to say about that. This case involved petitioner Mark Kitchens, who was found to be criminally insane and confined in a federal medical facility. Kitchens challenged the constitutionality of the federal statutes under which he was committed, arguing that the federal government lacked the power to confine him indefinitely when he should be confined in a state facility. In its decision, the court affirmed the principle of a double citizenship, meaning the individuals are simultaneously of the federal government and of the state which they reside. The court explained that this double citizenship creates obligations and entitles individuals to protections from both the federal government and their state of residence. The case highlights the complex nature of citizenship within the U.S. federal system, where individuals owe allegiance to and receive protection from both the national government, the Corporation of 1871, and their specific state, the Constitutional Republic of 1776. Okay, let's move on. Taxpayers are not de jure state citizens. Belmont versus Town of Gulfport. Taxpayers are not state citizens. A taxpayer, as you will read in the U.S. In the IRS tax manual or the U.S. tax code, when you read the U.S. tax code, the U.S. tax code defines taxpayers as U.S. citizens, not state citizens, not Americans. And within the very definition of the section that you're reading in the U.S. tax code that states that taxpayers are defined as U.S. citizens, it goes on to define location of United States. It goes on to define what a U.S. citizen is. And according to the U.S. tax code, within the section where it's defining a U.S. citizen, it defines a U.S. citizen as someone who resides or works in District of Columbia. Why? Because a taxpayer is tied to the de facto 1871 corporation that was incorporated almost 100 years after the 1776 Constitutional Republic. The Constitutional Republic are Americans. Americans aren't taxpayers. U.S. citizens aren't taxpayers. This entire video is designed to separate in our minds the difference between a constitutional American and a U.S. citizen. It's designed to separate in our minds the difference between the Constitutional Republic and the United States Corporation. State versus manual. The term citizen in the United States is analogous to the term subject in common law. The change of phrase has resulted from the change in government. Let's see what Google has to say about that. This statement reflects the historical shift in political philosophy from a monarchy, That's not where we want to get. The course itself involved a free black man named Manuel, who was convicted of assault and battery and sentenced to pay a fine. When he was unable to pay the fine, the court ordered him to be hired out for a short period to someone who would pay the fine for his services. The appeal centered on the constitutionality of this act, and the court's opinion touched upon the rights and status of free black people in North Carolina, including the nature of citizenship within the state. The court concluded that free persons, which we have to talk about that word, the court concluded that free persons of color born within North Carolina were citizens of the state and therefore entitled to the rights and protections guaranteed by the state constitution. This decision marked a significant step in the legal recognition of free black people as citizens in North Carolina, although it's important to note that the broader issue of citizenship for African Americans nationwide would not be settled until the passage of the 14th Amendment after the Civil War. That 14th Amendment is very, very, very important because the 14th Amendment, which was never properly ratified, by the way, is the federal government. The 14th Amendment is the corporation, the United States Corporation of 1871. which is distinct from the de jure republic, the constitutional republic underneath your feet that protects your rights, your God-given rights. The Constitution of 1776 and the Bill of Rights are documents to protect your rights, your God-given rights as an American. And as an American, you live under God's law. You, a man, a living, breathing man and woman of the land, of the republic, of the land. That's an American. And as a living, breathing man and woman, your rights are protected under God. And those documents were put in place to make sure that no one comes and infringes upon your rights that God has given you. And as a being and creature of God, you are naturally under the law of God, which is simply do not harm, do not kill, do not steal. If you do not do any of those things, then no one has any business with you. Those are God's law. All laws or crimes or unlawfulness, rather, would fall under do not kill, do not steal, do not harm. Now, obviously, you have a right to defend yourself. So if someone comes to attack you, then you have a right to defend yourself. Not to get too off subject, but God's law, we exist under God's law as Americans. And our God-given rights are protected by those documents. Those documents were put in place to protect our God-given rights. Let me put it that way. Now, as a U.S. citizen differs from a constitutional American in that a U.S. citizen is now an employee of a corporation called United States. A U.S. citizen is an employee of a corporation called United States that was incorporated in 1871 that now operates out of Washington, D.C. Keep in mind also, Washington, D.C. is not in any of the 50 states. Full stop. End of story. Let's deal with some facts right now. Washington, D.C. does not reside in the borders of any of the 50 states of the Union. Full stop. Let's move to another fact. The United States of America Constitutional Republic is a collection of 50 states. Full stop. That's what the United States of America Constitutional Republic is, a collection of 50 states. Full stop. D.C. is not a part of the 50 states that make up the Union. D.C. is not included in the 50 states that make up the Union, that make up the 1776 Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. D.C. is not within that. Washington, D.C. is not in the United States of America. Full stop. Washington, D.C. is a foreign land, foreign from the Constitutional Republic. That's why they always say a U.S. citizen exists. That's why I always say a location of United States is in District of Columbia. Because Washington, D.C. is the federal government. Washington, D.C. is where United States is located. I'm going to put a screenshot up there and we'll deal with some of these subjects in the next video. I don't want to get too far off course. So Washington, D.C. is not even in the United States of America Republic. Moving on. Supreme Court, Jones versus Timmer. The Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment protects very few rights because it neither incorporates the Bill of Rights nor protects all rights of individual citizens. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. Supreme Court, The only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to reside within the territorial boundaries of the United States. Ooh! Let me read that again. The Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment protects very few rights because it neither incorporates the Bill of Rights. Remember, the Bill of Rights was a part of the 1776 formation of the Constitutional Republic, United States of America. So this is saying the 14th Amendment protects very few rights because it neither incorporates the Bill of Rights. You're telling me the 14th Amendment does not protect the Bill of Rights? Who told us this? Nobody told me this. Well, shout out to all the people that are out there speaking about it, who I learned it from. It does not incorporate the Bill of Rights, nor protects all rights of individual citizens. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. Of course it doesn't, because the Bill of Rights means that you are a state citizen. If you are a state citizen, you are protected by the Bill of Rights, because a state citizen means an American. A state citizen means a member of we the people of the 1776 Constitutional Republic of the land. Supreme Court versus Valentine. The only absolute and unqualified right of a U.S. citizen is to reside within the territorial boundaries of the United States. The only right you have as a U.S. citizen, you are not protected by the Constitution. You are not protected by the Bill of Rights. Let me be specific. You are not protected by the original 1776 Constitution that was inked, that were the founding documents to protect your God-given rights. The federal government has a constitution of its own. So when we look at these politicians and they keep talking about the Constitution, they're talking about the Constitution that the federal government created. There was a Constitution that was created in 1776 that resulted in the Constitutional Republic of 1776, United States of America. The original. And then in 1871, the federal government drafted up their own constitution, which mimicked and was basically a copy of the original Constitution. So you have two constitutions that currently have the same thing. And then the federal government started to make amendments to the Constitution that they copied. Because the original Constitution of 1776 exists today with no amendments. See what Google got to say about it. Distinction between state and federal citizenship. These cases highlight the distinction between being a citizen of a state and a citizen of the United States, emphasizing that the 14th Amendment primarily concerns the latter. The 14th Amendment primarily concerns being a citizen of the United States, which is distinct from being a state citizen. State citizen meaning you are an American and you have your rights protected by the Bill of Rights. This video went a lot longer than I thought it was going to go. But hopefully you weren't too offended by me repeating a lot of that. And I did it on purpose because you're going to need to listen to this or listen to people who are telling you these things so you can research and find out for yourself. But I keep repeating because everyone has a preconceived notion that we've been taught in these public schools or whatever school we went to, private schools as well, not just public schools. But the schools we grew up in, nobody knows this information. Yet, it's all online. Someone has an interest in you remaining a U.S. citizen because if you're a U.S. citizen, remember, your only right is to reside within United States. And the truth of that matter, United States is only Washington, D.C. Trump is not the president of America. Trump is not president of America, the constitutional republic. Trump is the president of a corporation that was incorporated in 1871 that named itself United States, that operates out of Washington, D.C. So then, someone might ask the question, well, how can the federal government be above all the other states? Well, that's because there's a difference between state of California and California Republic. There's a difference between state of Michigan and Michigan Republic. Michigan Republic is the land that is underneath your feet, whereas state of Michigan is another corporation. It is another idea. It's a paperwork. It's an ens legis, which I'm going to discuss in another video because I want to keep this one under 40 minutes. So, what is the point of this video? The whole point of this 35-minute video was to bring to your awareness that there is a difference between a U.S. citizen and a constitutional American, and nobody fucking knows. Simple as that.